laboratory during the summer months, and this was a part of a NASA program. She was at the time a student at Queensboro Community College, and then she really enjoyed working in geology, and she joined Queen's College. I think she did it through GeoPass, and she began to work on my laboratory, primarily on the Tohoku 2011 earthquake. And she applied for the CONED STEM fellowship and was awarded that. And most recently, she was also awarded the Felix Matos fellowship. So she's been doing real well. She has an abstract for the Northeast GSA that's actually being presented within next week, I think it is. And she's really making a lot of progress. And she's also, again, learned a huge amount coming from a Queensboro Community College and joining our research group in Japan. So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Professor McHugh, for that introduction. Oh, let me share my screen, actually. Sorry. Okay. So today I will be sharing the findings that were found in two depositional environments, that being the slope and the trench that was studied in regards to the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami event. So the title of my talk is Extracting the Deep Marine Record of Earthquakes from the Japan Trench. So the main objectives of our study is to document what is known about the 2011 Tohoku event deposit to characterize earthquake event deposits. This will allow to go back in time and better define reoccurrence intervals, which segments of the trench have ruptured versus those that haven't. What can we learn about the lithology that will help characterize the history of earthquakes in Japan and in other settings? And to define turbidites, they are generally energetic and erosive, and to define homogenites, they are thick, lithologically homogeneous deposits that lack bioturbation and are acoustically transparent, which is a new concept that we are trying to understand. So we are trying to document the processes by which these homogenites are deposited, and they're linked to the 2011 Tohoku earthquake event. So the methods that were used to study for our study is previously collected parasound subbottom profiles and bathymetry that was collected during the 2016 RV Sonne 251, where there were also 10-meter long sediment cores, and here are the cores that were collected. The three here are from the slope, and the remaining ones that you can see here are the cores that we studied from the trench. And there we compiled descriptions and photos and interpreted grain size variability and magnetic susceptibility, in which we interpreted the results within the framework of previous pages obtained from shortly lived radioisotopes. So to give a background in regards of the 2011 earthquake and tsunami event, the Pacific plate subducts beneath the Ashika plate at 8.2 centimeters per year. The catastrophic Tohoku earthquake and tsunami Mw9 event occurred on March 11, 2011. The rupture slipped increased updip and reached the Japan Trench. It caused for the overlying plate to move 50 meters horizontally and about 7 meters vertically in a few seconds. And during this process is what caused and generated for the tsunami to occur. So the megathrust rupture triggered large-scale slumping on the outer trench slope near the area of maximum slip. Okay. And here shows an image of our study area. So here you can see the star marks the epicenter of where the rupture occurred on the surface. And the red marks the existing cores, and the contour lines actually show the zones of equal deformation. Okay. So to talk about shortly lived radioisotopes to track earthquake event deposits. So with normal slow deposition offshore Japan, lead is preserved only in the upper few centimeters of sediment. The lead we measured in event deposits had a high concentration, and therefore the event deposited was related to the 2011 Tohoku event. Lead decays 150 years because it has a short half-life of 22.3 years. And as you can see here on the right is a drawing to show the representation of the lead profile. So here we can see that 150 represents the decay rate, and here this represents the concentration. So essentially what we did, we found in the cores is that we found a peak, and therefore we interpreted that as the 2011 because it had a high concentration, and lead has a decay of 150 years, and it has a short half-life of 22.3 years. And so it was preserved in the upper few centimeters of the sediment. So the Fukushima nuclear power plant's accident, so cesium-137 and cesium-134 has a half-life of 2 years that entered the ocean and sediments. Cesium-137 was also put out in the atmosphere by nuclear testing that peaked in the mid-1960s. So when the sediments preserve a peak concentration of cesium-137, it is interpreted as being deposited in the 1960s. But if cesium-136 and cesium-134 are together, they reflect the Fukushima disaster. And cesium-134 has a half-life of 2 years, so only traces are found today. And since the expedition took place in 2016, we could only find traces because the cesium-134 was essentially gone. So the signature of the 2011 event deposit in the steep parts of the slope from 3,000 to 4,000 meters. So here on the left, we can see an image showing you the cores that were extracted and the trenches. So the blue dots that you see here are the cores, and then here of the slope, and then here the cores in red mark the trench. And then the star, of course, represents the epicenter. So here we identified areas where the 2011 event was deposited because the sediments either contain short-lived radioisotopes or not. So the steep areas of the slope didn't preserve the 2011 deposit, and the acoustic images coupled to core data indicate more indurated, presumably older strata exposed at the surface. So one of the main takeaways from what we found from the slope deposits is that they didn't preserve the 2011 event deposit. And then here, of course, the slope cores. And then here's an example of a core extracted from the slope. As you can see here, GOB 21815. And then here is the bathymetry image to show the core. And this core is a steep middle slope, you can see. It had a gradient average of 6 degrees, and it's from 3,000 to 4,000 meters. Yeah. So this core showed that the shortly lived radioisotopes are absent, and the lithology is sandy silt. So the grain size dominated was by very fine sand and coarse to medium silt. And you can see this through the plots that are shown here, how very fine sand is mostly dominated within this core in the slope, and then you have the silt and then the clay. And one of the, again, the takeaways is that this core did not show that the 2011, so it was absent. And as you can see that the black laminations actually show the sand, which are considered to be turbidites. You can see that through the core image. And now to talk about the signature of the 2011 event deposit in the Japan Trench. So again, here we have the image from before that shows the cores. And so now we're going to talk about the cores that are marked in red, which shows the trench. So here marks the north, central, and then area of maximum slip in south. So here is the trench. And as you can see, it goes from green and then to blue. And the blue shows that it has a very deep depth. And then it goes back to green and then very blue, as you can see here, which marks 8,000 meters. And so what it's important to mention is that the trench deepens from going north to south. So as you can see here with the depth. And so the lithology showed that homogenites and turbidites were present within the event with the core deposits. And as you can see, the cores. So here's an example of a core. Let me show the animations of that was extracted from the northern Japan trench. So as you can see here, there's a lot of sand, there's a lot of turbidites, but then as you can see here, it's acoustically transparent, and this is what we define as homogenite. And as you can see, there's another one here, and you can see the acoustically laminated, which is again the turbidites that are shown, and then you see another one here, and then maybe there's one here that you can see very lightly. And then this image shows you the location of the core, in this case being GOB 21817. And this shows you the depth, and you can see that this is a 10-meter long core. It's actually a little bit more than 10 meters, as you can see. So here shows the grain size variability of the clay weight, the silt weight, and the sand weight. And of course, here we have the image of the core photo of the core that was extracted, the upper few meters. So here it's from 0 to 70 centimeters. And as you can see here, it's mainly dominated by sand. And then you have silt and then the clay. And then here you can see in the core photo how it's really dark. And this actually shows a deposit of the sand, right? And then in this area of the core is actually where we found evidence of the 1994 San Rico earthquake event deposit that was based on the lead radioisotope. And this earthquake was a magnitude of 7.7. As you can see here, again, it's dark, and this represents it's more sand. And the magnetic susceptibility shows the sand, as you can see. And then here is an image of the navigation. So here it shows you where the core is and the depths, and then the black lines show the navigation lines of which the ship took directions in taking the data. And then here's an example of the central Japan trench. Here we have core GOB 21812, which is 10 meters long. And as you can see again through this deposit that showed very similar findings to the northern Japan trench, is that it's laminated, and we have an acoustically transparent homogenite again, as you can see here. You can see here in the arrows the laminations. And then here again shows the clay weight, silt weight, and sand weight, again with the magnetic susceptibility, along with the core photo. So the Tohoku event was not present, but there was a lot of sandy turbidites common. So as you can see here, the sand has peaks, and then the magnetic susceptibility shows the peaks of the sand, and then the cores, as you can see here. And again, you have the lead and cesium-137. And then here we have the bathymetry and the navigation of the core and the depth. So the downslope of area of maximum slip. So here we have the downslope of area of maximum slip. Here we have the star that shows the epicenter, and the red arrow shows the area of maximum slip. And so the star shows where the rupture happened. And so what happened is that you have the Pacific plate that is going down, and you have the overlying Oshka plate. So it gets stuck, but somewhere deep you have a rupture, meaning that an earthquake happened deep. So what happens is that once the rupture occurred, the whole thing slips very fast, and normally the motion doesn't reach the trench, but in this case it did. Therefore, the motion was much bigger and the displacement of the plates reached the trench. And therefore, it generated this huge tsunami because the motion was so big. And so the contour line shows these zones of deformation. And this is a geophysical calculation that seismologists do. So here, 40 meters is where the most deformation occurred, and then 20 meters is where it's intermediate, and then here 2 meters is where it was least. So therefore, when you're closer to the area of deformation is where you would expect landslides, expect turbidites, because it's very high frequency shaking and very fast displacement, whereas in areas farther away, the shaking was not as strong. But the effects of the long waves were felt farther away. So close, high shaking, high waves, and high frequency. But the farther away you were, you had lower shaking, and the frequency of the waves are much greater, and they move much slower. And we think it's that motion that entrains the sediment and moves it around that homogenizes it without making it turbulent, as in the turbidite. So here we have the 2011 Tohoku event deposit. The lithology is homogeneous diatomaceous mud with sandy turbidites. And so here we have the radioisotopes that shows the lead, and lead concentration is 250 dpm per gram, and up here it's 150, you can see. So it has a much higher concentration than the cores shown in the central region. So therefore, this is a younger lead. Because it's younger, we are interpreting it as the 2011, and it has traces of cesium-137 and cesium-134. So when we have those two together, we can interpret it as the 2011 Tohoku event deposit. And the lithology is homogeneous diatomaceous mud, sandy turbidites. So here you're in the area of high shaking and high frequency. So here you will see your turbidites and mass wasting. So the yellow lines here in this core shows the turbidites. These mark the turbidites. And then this marks the clay. And so the reason why Fukushima is shown at the top is because cesium-134 is present. So the Tohoku event deposit is indicated by the high concentration of lead and by the fact that cesium-134 and cesium-137 is present. Okay. Now we will talk about the southern Japan trench, this right here. So in the southern Japan trench, here is a basin with the homogenite that is 2011, and there's another older deposit that shows where there's another earthquake, and the navigation image shows the depth as well as the deepest parts, which is 8,000 meters. And this is the core, as you can see here by the star. And the core is in the basin, which is noted because you have steep walls and contours are very close to each other, while here we are open. And as you can see, the elevation difference in what is shallow and what is deep. So here we have a deep basin and this is where the 2011 accumulated. And as you can see, the core that I'm showing is GOB 21804. So here, so you see the acoustic laminated and as well as the transparent. So to conclude our findings, the 2011 Tohoku earthquake event deposit was absent from the steep areas of the slope. It was present downslope of the area of maximum slip and the southern segment of the Japan Trench terminal basin. It is absent from the northern and central segments of the Japan distal from the area of maximum slip. The grain size variability showed that the slope lithology contained 25 to 50% sand, and the trench lithology is finer grained and composed of silt, which is 40 to 60%. Sand is 20%, and clay is 20%. So the grain size differences between the homogenites and the turbidites is that homogenites are composed of silt and clay. Meanwhile, turbidites are composed of sand and silt and normally graded. And it's important to note and that the implications are that if you were to go to an area and you identify an homogenite, it will mean that you are close to the area of maximum slip and at the rupture in the future. However, you have to take into consideration of the slope of the trench. Because if it's deeper, the sediments are going to move down the slope. So we are accounting for that. It's simply just not as closer to the area where you had the big earthquake, but there are also morphological components that need to be taken into consideration. So here we are talking about the proposed processes in which we believe that these homogenites form. So to explain the image here on the right, here you are above large earthquake ruptures, you have the strong shaking, large and slow oscillations of long durations. And so here you had everything. You had the strong shakings, you had large and slow oscillations, you had everything. You had the mass wasting, such as the landslides, you had the mud flows, and you had the turbidites. And you had the sediment plumes, so you had everything in here. And then for B, the outside large rupture zone, large and slow oscillations with long durations. Here is outside of that area, you only had the slow oscillations of long durations, so you had mud flows and then sediment plumes. And those are the ones that form these thick homogenites. And then C, proximal to small earthquakes near rupture zone, high frequency shaking is dominant. Event deposits depend on pre-existing instabilities. And so here, the small earthquakes such as the 1994 Senrico magnitude 7 that we talked about earlier, that was present in the north, probably only had like a little turbidite. That is, it didn't have the long, slow motion of the magnitude 9 earthquake. This was a magnitude 7 earthquake that was a lesser magnitude. So you only had maybe just a turbidite. So what we are trying to do is trying to differentiate in the sedimentation record the effects of low magnitude earthquakes versus high magnitude earthquakes. And the idea is that these homogenites may be related to these powerful high magnitude earthquakes. And so to further explain, what we think happens is that in an earthquake, there is shaking. And you have an earthquake that has a magnitude 9. It will produce long waves, and these waves have a much bigger, longer frequency. The frequency is not as high as smaller earthquakes, but what happens is the sediment that is loose on the slope is shaken and resuspended. And we think that is that entrainment process that leads to the homogenization of the sediment. So we think that these homogenites might represent very high magnitude strong earthquakes. So magnitude 9 earthquakes produce these long waves, and this may affect the sediments on the seafloor. Therefore, the earthquake will shake the seafloor, and maybe the long waves, we are still unsure, have the effect of homogenizing the sediment. So that sediment is resuspended by the shaking and begins going down slope and is deposited as a homogenite. In contrast, a turbidite is turbulent sediment suspended in water, and they can move very fast. As opposed to the homogenite, it is finer grained that is resuspended by the earthquake and shaken to the point it becomes homogeneous, and then it moves down the slope and eventually ends up in the trench. And to acknowledge and thank, I would like to acknowledge and thank Cecilia McHugh, Sharif Mystique, Leonardo Sieber, Michael Strasser, Toshiya Kanematsu. Thank NSF for funding the research project, JAMSTEC, and the captains, officers, crews, and scientific party of the RV Sonne 251 expedition. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. And so we'll take questions for both of our speakers now. I just want to apologize again for losing power and disappearing for 3 minutes, but I'm back. And so people can just unmute themselves and ask questions, or if you're a little shy, you can just type it in and I'll let the speakers know about the question. So any questions to begin?
Yes, hi. I have a question for Robert.
Go ahead.
Hi, Robert. Hi. I just have 2 questions. I think it was for one of the very first slides that you showed. I had trouble understanding where the syncline and anti-synclines were again.
Okay. Gotta do the screen share. Okay. So can you see some slides?
Not yet.
No?
No, not yet.
That's fine. Maybe now?
Just about.
Yeah, it just has to process.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the first ones.
Yeah, so
yeah, that one.
Yeah, so here, so this whole thing is called the Indo-Burman Ranges, and what's happening is, as these, if you look at the cross section, as this Indian plate is being pushed under, is being subducted under the Burman plate, the Burma plate, material is being scraped off the top of it, and so all the stuff that was deposited on here starts getting like almost like shaved off it by the overriding plate, and so as it gets shaved off, it gets deformed as these big folds. And so we have the anticlines plunging up, not plunging up, but folding up, and then the syncline part folding down. And so here, that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing these anticlines and synclines one after the other. And so this is in profile. And then this is what they look like looking down on them. So they kind of look like these long, more or less northerly directed linear features. And so,
okay.
Yeah, and so now this is where, when there's precipitation, you have erosion into the synclinal valleys, and that's where the rivers start to form. And so it really, so we have a lot of north trending, northerly oriented streams and rivers in this Indo-Burman ranges.
Okay, yeah, because I can see it better with the cross section as opposed to just pointing, looking down. It was hard to see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this is significant because they're all leading right in. They're basically almost like tunnels, right, leading into the basin that we're working in here. And so it really directs a lot of this, potentially directs a lot of this Indo-Burman material, which is very different from everything else around here into the basin. So this material is some of the oldest parts of it are from the Cretaceous, right? I mean, when the collision first starts, that's probably buried quite deep at this point, but. So there's very old material here. It's been really strongly deformed and metamorphosed, and also deformed and metamorphosed in a different way than what you have for the Himalayas with the collision. So I'm expecting very different age profiles from both these groups.
Oh, okay. Oh, one portion is from one period, and the other portion's from another period.
They're in some ways from kind of the same time, but because the sources are different, they should show a different spread of ages in the material. So I'm not really trying to so much as date any mineral from these places, but it's just that if you have multiple sources inputting stuff into these Indo-Burman ranges, they should show a huge range of ages, right? So if I start dating the stuff from that material, I should get some that's old, some that's young, and there should be a big range of it. But then the Himalayas have a more constrained time history. Because of the collision and the metamorphism, the argon can become very fluid, so that clock can kind of get reset. So they'll have probably a narrower and also a different spread of ranges of ages.
Okay, and just one more question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The animation slide. I was just wondering what that was about again.
Yeah. So this is from another study, and. I'm not sure if I don't think the animation is playing right now, right?
No.
So it, how do I get it to play? It's a GIF. I don't know how it.
You have to just put one slide at a time.
Yeah, well, it's a GIF. It's all stacked together. I don't know.
Put it into presenter
Yeah,
mode.
let me just stop it and then I'll try it like this. But so basically what it's showing there is the changes in time. I'm babbling right now.
It's
It
okay.
shows the progression of those materials. So let me try to do this share. I think this will work. Okay. Oh boy. There we go. And it's not playing here. Okay, good. Yeah. So
okay,
so we have these different formations. And so what it's showing is if you look down in the bottom too, it shows the ages. So we go from like 3.5 to 2 million to the present day. And so what it's showing is like a snapshot of the sediments that are deposited in this area, right? So we have these two green ones, the green and blue, and they're deposited relatively flat. They get deeper the further away you go, more towards the south that you get to the right-hand side of this figure. And that's just a result of the topography of the setup of the basin at that time. And then as time goes on, the Shillong Plateau now starts rising up. And that's happening like to the far left-hand side of the screen, almost off the screen. And as it rises up, it's this huge, heavy plateau. It causes the Shillong, the Surma material, the Surma basin to start to flex. And it becomes a deeper basin. And so now those like pink and red materials get put in, they're thicker on the northern side, right? Which is the reverse of what it was. So they're deposited because there's a lot of space, so you can build up a big thick deposit. And then because there's all this material, it's pushing down on everything and causing even the material below it to start flexing and bending down. So everything here is very responsive to the local tectonics, which is all I was trying to show there. They were showing a lot more with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So as there's more sediment layering, it starts to flex as there's more layering, I guess.
Yeah, the thick, and so the thicker it gets, the heavier it is, and it just causes everything to start bending and warping.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Okay, so we have a question from Victoria to Jamie. What kind of materials were you using for your research?
So for my research, because the expedition happened in 2016, so I was basically using the previously collected data to analyze the cores from the slope and trench regions. So what I mostly did, because unfortunately I can't go to the lab, and mostly this research was done through online and through at home. So what I did was use Excel and a kaleidograph to compile and plot the graphs of the cores of the slope and trench data that was found previously, and just interpret them based on what the findings showed.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, well, if there's no other ones, I would like to thank both students, Robert and Jamie, for an amazing job. Undergraduate student and PhD student, congratulations, nicely done. So we'll be here next week. We have more talks for the rest of the semester every Wednesday. Please tune in every Wednesday. We have great speakers for the rest of the semester. Thanks again to the two students and for everyone showing up today. And
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, well, take care, everyone. I'll see you next week.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.